Hey there, and welcome back. You know, we love to go deep on this show, and today we're doing something a little different. This deep dive is all about you. Specifically, maximizing your impact out there on the world, while at the same time finding a little inner peace. It's a tricky combo, I know, especially for driven people like you. And to help us with this, we're going to be taking a look at the work of Gino Wickman.
Oh, yeah, Gino Wickman.
You might know him from Traction, but his newest book, Shine, which he co-wrote with Dube, takes a look at the inner game of successful entrepreneurs.
It's interesting, because they don't just offer like this surface level advice, the kind of stuff you see everywhere.
Right.
They kind of go deep right into the psychology of success. They explore the personal stories, even the struggles behind some of the most driven individuals.
Yeah, they get really personal in this book, which I found very interesting. And they start with a pretty intriguing premise, too. They argue that the very traits that make entrepreneurs successful, the things that drive them to achieve, can also be the seeds of their downfall. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, it certainly aligns with what we see, in a lot of high achievers. Think about it, right? The passion, the persistence, that constant need to push forward, all these qualities can lead to incredible accomplishments, but they can also, create a sort of inner turmoil. A feeling that no matter what they achieve, it's never quite enough.
Yeah, it's like this double-edged sword. On the one hand, you're getting stuff done, you're passionate, you have this incredible vision. But on the other hand, you might be prone to burnout.
Yeah.
Workaholism, always feeling like you need to be in control. And the authors actually get really personal about this, sharing their own struggles with these very things.
Yes, and I think their vulnerability is one of the most compelling aspects of the book. They don't shy away from sharing, their own experiences with childhood trauma, addiction, even near-death experiences. It really underscores, this idea that external success doesn't always equate to internal peace.
Yeah, and they even talk about some very specific things from their childhoods that they feel contributed to their drive. For instance, Wickman opens up about experiencing abuse as a child.
Wow.
And both he and Dube admit to sucking their thumbs till they were 8 years old.
Oh, wow.
They suggest it was a way to self-soothe, perhaps a coping mechanism for some early stress.
It makes you wonder how many of those little, quirks that we all have are actually, tied back to something much deeper.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And these stories really highlight how many driven people might be running from something trying to fill a void.
Yeah.
Their achievements, as impressive as they are, might actually be a way to compensate for that inner turmoil. We're getting into some pretty heavy stuff here, but it's important, right? Because how many of us can relate to that feeling of, as they put it, crushing it externally while struggling internally?
Right.
I know I've definitely felt that disconnect at times.
Oh, yeah. I think it's more common than we realize. And, the authors don't just leave us with the problem. They offer a way to understand it, which leads to their second big idea. That it's not just about being driven, but about what's driving you.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit. They break down decision-making into two distinct categories.
Right?
Decisions driven by love and decisions driven by fear.
Right.
This is where things get really interesting.
Exactly. Decisions from love, as they describe it, come from your true self.
Okay.
From your heart, your intuition. It's about being aligned with your core values and making choices that feel right on a deeper level.
Whereas decisions from fear are driven by that ego voice in your head.
Right.
The one trying to protect you from past pain or future failure. It can manifest in so many ways.
Absolutely. They give some really relatable examples. It could be clinging to a toxic client because you're terrified of losing the revenue, or not hiring someone because you're afraid of losing control. Even pushing down your feelings in a relationship to avoid conflict.
Right.
That's a fear-based decision.
Wow, that's a good point. It really makes you think about all the little ways fear can creep into our decision-making.
And the author suggests that recognizing these patterns is the first step in shifting to a more love-based approach.
Okay, so how do we actually make that shift? How do we start rewiring our decision-making at its core? Because that sounds pretty intense.
Well, that's where things get a little... Perhaps. But stick with me here because it's fascinating. Wickman and Dube assert that we are at our core made of energy.
Okay, I'll admit that's not a concept I've really considered before. But are they just talking metaphorically here, or are they getting into, like, actual physics?
They actually bring in some physics to back up their claims.
Wow, okay, so they're saying that we all have these energy fields and that our emotions, our past experiences, all of that can create blockages in this energy.
Precisely. And these blockages can manifest in a variety of ways, from addiction to unhealthy behaviors to just feeling constantly drained and depleted.
So it's like We're carrying around all this baggage, all this past trauma and resentment, and it's literally weighing us down, energetically speaking.
Exactly. They even go so far as to say that addiction is a symptom of this blocked energy. And they're talking about all kinds of addiction, not just substance abuse.
So workaholism, the need to be right all the time, constantly seeking external validation, those could all be signs of blocked energy.
According to the authors, yes. And they argue that if we can release these blockages, we can tap into a whole new level of energy, creativity, and ultimately success.
Okay, I'm intrigued. But how do we actually go about doing that? How do we release these energy blocks? So we're talking about releasing these energy blocks. I don't know, it kind of sounds like we need some sort of energetic drain cleaner. What do Wickman and Dube suggest?
Well, they offer a surprisingly diverse toolkit. I mean, some are pretty familiar, like therapy and journaling.
Okay, those make sense. Those are things that, a lot of people are already using for personal growth.
Exactly, but they also suggest things like meditation and breath work, which can be powerful for, calming the mind, connecting with your inner self.
I've dabbled in meditation, but honestly, I haven't really stuck with it.
Hmm.
I always struggle to quiet my mind.
I think a lot of people feel that way at first.
Yeah.
But even a few minutes a day can make a difference. The key is consistency.
All right, I'll give it another shot. What about the other things they mentioned, like energy healing and plant medicine? Those sound a little out there for me.
Yeah, those are definitely more alternative approaches. And the authors emphasize, proceeding with caution and guidance. They're not suggesting everyone should run out and try ayahuasca.
Right, of course. But they do believe these modalities can be helpful for some people on their journey of self-discovery and releasing those blocks.
Yes, but they also stress that, it's a personal choice and not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Right. Wickman actually shares his own experience with therapy in the book. He worked with a therapist to create a list of all the painful experiences from his life.
Oh, wow.
And then they methodically worked through each one, addressing those deep-seated wounds.
Sounds like intense work.
It does. But he credits that process with helping him unlock so much energy and creativity in his life.
It speaks to their point that confronting these deep-seated issues takes real effort. But the potential rewards in terms of personal growth and fulfillment are huge.
It's almost like peeling back layers of an onion, right? Each layer you shed brings you closer to your true self.
That's a great analogy. And speaking of the true self, the authors don't just leave us with a theoretical understanding of these concepts. They give us practical tools to put it all into practice, which is where those 10 disciplines come in.
Yes, the 10 disciplines, this is where the rubber meets the road. Now, I know we can't cover all 10 in detail, but which ones do you think would be particularly valuable for our listener?
Yeah.
Someone who's driven, successful, but maybe feeling a bit stuck or unfulfilled.
Well, given what we know about our listener, I think 10-year thinking is crucial. This discipline encourages us to shift our focus from the short term to the long term. It's about setting a vision for where you want to be in 10 years and then making decisions that align with that vision.
So instead of getting caught up in the day-to-day grind, we're stepping back and looking at the bigger picture.
Exactly. And this can be so powerful for entrepreneurs who are often caught in the whirlwind of immediate demands. It allows you to prioritize what truly matters and make choices that support your long-term goals and well-being.
The authors give a great example of this in the book, talking about one of Wickman's first EOS clients, Image One.
Okay.
They used this 10-year thinking to navigate the chaos of the pandemic. While other businesses were, panicking, they had the cash reserves and the long-term vision to weather the storm.
It's a perfect illustration of how this discipline can provide stability and resilience even in the face of major challenges.
Okay, I'm sold on that one. What else do you think would resonate with our listener?
Given the fast-paced, always-on nature of our listener's life, I think take time off is another essential discipline.
I was just thinking that. It seems so counterintuitive in our culture of productivity and hustle. But the authors are adamant about the importance of truly disconnecting from work.
It's not just about, taking a vacation where you're still checking emails on the beach. It's about creating intentional space to recharge and reconnect with yourself.
They suggest things like digital detoxes, spending time in nature, pursuing hobbies, basically anything that helps you step away from the demands of work and tap into your inner world.
They even recommend scheduling a month-long sabbatical. Wickman shares that he's taken August off for over 20 years.
Wow, a whole month. That sounds incredible, but also a little terrifying from a business perspective.
I know it can seem daunting, but they argue that this kind of extended time off allows for deep rest and renewal, leading to increased creativity and productivity when you return to work.
So it's not just about relaxation, it's about actually boosting your effectiveness in the long run.
Exactly, and they have several other disciplines related to this idea of creating boundaries and protecting your energy.
Yes, no. Your 100% comes to mind. That's about defining your ideal work boundaries, how many hours a week and weeks a year you want to work, and then fiercely protecting those boundaries.
It's about acknowledging that we all have limits, and operating within those limits allows us to be more productive and fulfilled.
And then there's say no,
Mm-hmm.
often which can be so hard for driven people who want to do it all. But the authors stress the importance of learning to decline requests that don't align with your goals, values, or energy.
It's about recognizing that every yes to something is a no to something else. And by saying no to the things that drain us or distract us from our priorities, we create space for the things that truly matter.
They even talk about the importance of delegating effectively, which ties into their discipline of don't do $25 an hour work.
That's a great one. It's about identifying the tasks that you could pay someone else to do and then freeing yourself up to focus on your unique strengths and the activities that generate the most value.
So we've got 10-year thinking, taking time off, know you're 100% say no, often don't do $25 an hour work.
Wow, that's a lot to digest.
It is, but remember the goal isn't to master all of these overnight. It's about picking one or two that resonate with you and starting to experiment with them in your own life.
I love that. It's about progress, not perfection. And speaking of progress, the authors actually use this intriguing term to describe the state you can achieve when you combine these disciplines with all that inner work we talked about earlier, the float state.
Ah, yes, the float state.
I'm so curious about this concept. It's like this combination of flow and float. I love that word. But what does it actually mean? What does it feel like to be in the float state?
Well, it's that feeling of, being completely in sync with yourself and the world around you.
Okay, that sounds amazing. But can you elaborate a bit? What does that actually look like in everyday life?
I mean, imagine this, right? You're fully present in each moment. You're energized and focused. Your mind is clear and creative, and you're operating from a place of deep alignment with your true self. So it's not just about inner peace. It's also about, amplifying your effectiveness in the world.
Exactly. It's that powerful combination of inner peace and outer impact, something we often, think of as mutually exclusive.
Yeah, and that's what I find so inspiring about Wickman and Dube's message. It's not either, it's both hand. We can be driven and peaceful, successful and fulfilled.
They're painting a picture of a world where we're all operating from a place of love, not fear, making decisions that are, in alignment with our highest selves and the greater good.
Wow, imagine the ripple effect if everyone shed their baggage and tapped into that pure energy. It's a pretty powerful thought.
It is, and it all starts with, each of us taking responsibility for our own inner world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a challenge. What's one small step you can take today based on what you've learned?
Maybe it's trying that true self-assessment from the book, seeing where you land on that spectrum of love-based versus fear-based decisions.
Or perhaps exploring one of those shedding techniques we talked about. Even just 5 minutes of meditation or journaling can make a difference.
Remember, every little bit counts on the journey to freeing your true self.
And who knows, maybe one day you'll be floating through life just like Gino Wickman and Dube. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.